Hi, Melissa. Thank you so much for joining me today on my channel. And I think I'd like to start our conversation today with just a quick introduction to who you are and what you do, your languages, and all of that.
Okay, well, thanks for having me, Sarah. This is quite exciting for me. So yeah, thank you for talking with me. I'm, first of all, an English language teacher, and I have around 4 years experience doing this job. I currently live in Turkey, but I have dual heritage. I'm a simultaneous bilingual, I should say.
It's a good term to use, yeah.
So yeah, I acquired 2 languages at birth, and I also learned another language in high school, which was quite lucky.
So you have English and Turkish and your third language, French, right? And also how we know each other, of course. So which is from Australia, actually, because we're both exchange students. Yeah, both exchange students over there in Australia and in our Lions Club exchange program. And then I actually went over and stayed with you for a couple of weeks in Turkey. So that was really crazy, actually, to think about it now. I you were in Australia next summer. Let's go to Turkey to a couple of weeks with that I met over in another country. So we are pretty close. We've known each other for a decade now.
Yeah.
It's been a while. So with your English and your Turkish, because you are still in Turkey right now, but you're teaching English and continuing your studies in English teaching and all of that. So what do you do with your teaching? What is your teaching experience? What kind of jobs have you worked in with your English teaching?
So I started out with preschool.
Okay.
So very young learners.
Little ones, yeah.
Yeah, and then I just worked there for 1 year, and then I moved on to a primary school first year, and then I got the same class the following year, second year. So again, young learners, but I felt that experience was better than the preschool experience, just because I felt like more of a language teacher.
Okay.
Primary school, that was my impression and experience. And then after that, I did my master's in the UK. When I came back, I started working in a university to teach English, well, prepare students to go into university, basically, to improve the academic English as well as normal everyday English. So,
yeah. And that's really interesting too that you mentioned that teaching older students is more like teaching the actual language, because I noticed that too when I started teaching little kids. I did it for a very short time because it wasn't for me, very like a month, but I still did it. And I noticed that too. It's because when you teach little kids, it's yes, you do teach the subject, but more than that, you're teaching them just how to be people in society, how to be friends, how to be nice, how to do all of those things too, and the language. Whereas, when you work with older students, you actually can focus on the subject, and it's really nice for people who are more interested in the subject than on teaching social skills.
Also, it's nice to have a conversation with older students. Have a lot more insight in the world, and they have their own opinions, and they want to share their opinions. So it's nice to exchange just information, not just teach, which I find more enjoyable.
Yeah, me too. I really did enjoy that too, working with even high school age students. You still can kind of do that because they're like teenagers, college students. They're pretty close, and especially once you get toward the end of high school. But yeah, it is really. It's just there's just more opportunity to not just go into the subject, but to just think and discuss and to do all of that. And yeah, I think that we're similar in that way, gravitating toward that approach. And then especially in college, of course, then you no longer have to do really any of the classroom management and all of that. It's just the subject, which I don't know about you, but classroom management was never my strength.
Teaching, definitely, I have to learn how to manage a group of kids. But yeah, like you said, all the students, they they're more willing to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to disrupt the class, so you don't really
Yeah.
deal with rules
Mm-hmm.
in it. So yeah,
That's true. Yeah. So with your students then, you taught them English or Turkish, or like did you do instruction in both languages? How did that work?
So I taught a range of levels. I started out with very low level students in terms of English. So I had to use a little bit of Turkish, especially giving instructions, but the higher the levels, the less Turkish I used. So my main aim was to teach English, of course, but every now and then I had to use Turkish for important announcements or some instructions and things like that.
Okay. And so your students then, they are, or they were, when you taught your students in Turkey, they were mostly Turkish, right? So that's their native language. And most of them probably didn't have the experience that you have growing up with with a parent from each language, each country, like a British parent and a Turkish parent, and having that exposure. What do you see, like, how do you think it's different to learn that way, like the way that you learned versus the way that they're learning, or even like with your French studies, because you acquired that language like a foreign language, whereas English and Turkish are both your native languages?
So yeah, they are quite different because the issue of age, first of all, I acquired English and Turkish at a very young age. Like I said, they became my native languages, both of them. And I couldn't base those on any previous knowledge or any previous language that I knew. But French, I could base it on the other languages that I knew, and I got some help from English, some help from Turkish. I realized that some things are not that different, between languages. Of course, they are all quite different from each other, but yeah. And I also had the background knowledge. Very important in language teaching, you start the lesson with, activating the schema, getting the students to think about things before you actually teach the language. So yeah, that was another issue. Also, the learning process, I would say, because learning French, I had to use a lot of repetition to learn French. I remember my teachers used to make us write conjugations of verbs again and so that was I felt like, oh, am I going to write this again? Back then I was a teenager. So but it helped,
Yeah, it's useful to have the repetition too, and to have all of that. And I think it's interesting too, because you were saying like the process of learning English and Turkish, like you didn't have all of those like language learning skills, because when you learn another language, you can transfer a lot of the skills. You don't have to learn how to read, write, speak, and listen all over again. You do have to learn how to do it in that language, but once you learn how to read, you know how to associate the letters or the graphics, whatever they are, characters, anything with sound, with the language. So you then can just apply those skills to another language. But it is also a lot of work to learn through studying and to learn a language that way. So I don't know if one language or one way is necessarily easier than the other, but they're definitely very different processes, like between learning as we learn a native language through just using it, and then as a foreign language, learning by like you said, like drilling, like writing the conjugations, and by practicing just drilling it. What has been your experience with that? Like, do you think that one way is easier than the other, or how are they different than that? Because I know I have my experience with English, learning as a native language, and then learning another language. And for me, learning Spanish, I had to learn like how language is structured. I had to learn language because I didn't have another language. Like my brain didn't process multiple languages yet, so it was really different acquiring another language. But for you, you already had two, so your brain was already operating on two languages, and then adding a third one. So what was that experience like for you?
That's true, actually. I'm afraid that I had an advantage in a way. Yeah, learning languages, they change your brain, basically. They change how your brain is wired. And so having acquired two languages at an early age, it helped me have some skills, like switching skills, maybe, like processing skills, decision making, that sort of thing. So that came quite easy for me, natural for me. And so I felt like it was quite easy for me to pick up French. But I think it's worth mentioning that motivation has a huge
Definitely
language learning, because if I didn't like learning French, then I don't think I would have really learned it. So that was a huge benefit for me. Like, I was really interested in French. I really wanted to learn it, and so I think that was another factor worth mentioning. You know, I'm not saying bilingualism.
Of course.
Learn no, I think anyone can learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, anyone can learn any language, anything. And like you said, motivation is huge. It's just a matter of how much you work at it. And, yeah.
I've seen with my students as well, like the ones who are really motivated just fly.
Yeah.
They, you know, achieve a lot, but the ones who are not that motivated, they don't get too far.
So would you say then that, like, with your Turkish and English, that you understand, like, even learning them as a native language? Because, well, I mean, I don't know how you learned English in school, if you did focus on, like, conjugations and things like that. And honestly, I don't know a lot about English from the perspective of a foreign language, as far as like how it's acquired, because it's not, you know, conjugated like Latin. This language is not like, it's not the same. I haven't gone through that process. But when you learned it in school, did you also learn like the structural side of it, as well as having your native advantage at home?
Well, yeah, I went to a normal Turkish school, and so their English education was built for or designed for Turkish, native Turkish speakers. So they were teaching English as a second language or a foreign language. And so there was a fair bit of grammar in lessons, but surprisingly, I didn't really pick that up that much until I started teaching, or until I started studying how to become a teacher. I realized that I didn't know much about English grammar. Well, I had to learn English grammar first to be able to teach it. So,
yeah, me too.
Yeah, maybe at school I was like, nah, I know this. So, yeah, maybe I didn't feel the need to learn the grammar.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So I guess you learned it more like both languages from the perspective of like how I learned my native language at school, because you would still do even for your native language, like even for Turkish, I'm sure when you were learning it in school, you still did learn some of the grammar, you know, some of the structures and things like that. You just learn it a little bit differently than like taking a foreign language class, like with your French. But it sounds like your English, since they started at such a young age in Turkey, like we have some bilingual schools that are kind of like that over here, and they're mostly Spanish and English, and then they do it kind of like that. So it is like teaching it like a native language as far as the grammar concepts. But I think it's really interesting how you still learn, like even without directly learning linguistics or learning, you know, language structures, you still have like acquired a similar understanding as I did going through the process later on in life of learning a second language. It just happened at a younger age and happened over more time.
Yeah, that's true. Oh. Very interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. All right, so let's open this conversation up for discussion in the comments and see if we have any other bilinguals or trilinguals or any linguals, and see like how it'd be really interesting to see from other people how their experience has been going through learning other languages, and like especially people who have been raised with multiple languages, and like, you know, in Europe, like a lot of people can just learn like many languages. over there. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this conversation goes in the discussion in the comments down below. And thank you so much for joining me today, Melissa. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, thank you very much. Quite an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I really enjoyed it too. My brain is like thinking of all these, it's going in all these new places now. So lots of
go back and think about my process.
Yeah, it's really helpful. Yeah. So we'll see. I'm really excited to see where the rest of this conversation goes in the comments once this gets out and it's a chance to watch it and engage with our conversation. And yeah, thank you so much for being in this video today. And we'll end with that.